And so we are now ready to go on with the next talk with Frank and Perk from Sumo Logic. And Sumo Logic is a cloud native observability and security company. But the interesting thing about their talk, I think, this is one of my favorite topics, is their journey from internal and proprietary to open source. So I think open source is a topic that's always popular, right? Lucas definitely also a open source contributor, wrote a couple of blog posts on how what he does. But nevertheless, I don't want to keep you any longer. Frank and Perk, are you ready?
We are indeed.
Okay, yep. Great. Hello, then everyone. Take it away, please.
All right. Thanks for having us today. So yeah, folks, Frank Reno. I'm a product manager over at Sumo Logic, and I'm also Sumo's open source ambassador and share all the open source initiatives here with Perk. Perk, want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Marcin, Perk, Stożek. I'm open source lead at Sumo Logic and also engineering manager, and I do awesome stuff with Frank around our open source initiative at Sumo.
Yeah, so before we dive in and kind of set some context here, I thought it would be good to talk a little bit about Sumo Logic, about what we do. You know, Sumo Logic, we ingest your full application stack of machine data, all your critical telemetry from your applications, your cloud providers, your SaaS providers, your infrastructure, no matter where that infrastructure runs. We provide a SaaS offering that lets you collect and centralize that data, give you the tools to monitor, visualize and alert on that data, troubleshoot any issues you may have using our machine learning driven analytics to identify root cause, and help you optimize your application's performance and security. All these capabilities, they're provided within a single platform that's designed to help your operational teams, your security teams, your business teams. And Sumo Logic, we were born in the cloud. Our offering has been a SaaS since the beginning. That actually, plays some interesting perspectives into this talk and into how we work. I don't think that this is news to anyone who's on this call. I think everyone was well aware of the architecture changes and the digital transformation that has taken place over the years. Over time, we've moved away from monolithic applications and three-tier architectures where we had well-established tooling and the problems were well understood, to needing to handle significantly more scale, much faster velocity, distributed architectures to give us more modularity in our applications. And at the same time, giving that scale, it also introduces some challenges. We have a lot of new complexity. We have a lot more surface area to attack. These architectures have had a profound impact on these things. They've definitely increased the complexity of observing the systems that they're there. If you haven't seen this tweet before, derivatives of this tweet, this is still one of my favorites. We replaced our monolith and microservices so that every outage could be more like a murder mystery. And for any of you who have ever had to troubleshoot or diagnose problems happening on a distributed system, I'm sure you felt this way. While these distributed architectures have greatly increased the velocity we can work with and the scale we can handle, the ease at which we can introduce new capabilities, they've definitely made observability of these systems a lot more complex. I think that in addition to architectures changing, I think that there's been a profound shift in also open source over the years. A report that Perk and I always like to read and that comes out every year is the State of Enterprise Open Source. This is put out by Red Hat. And while this is, from 2020, I actually think that there's some key insights here. 95% of companies believe that open source is strategically important to their investments. Only 5% view it as somewhat important. Open source is changing the world, whether it's from, great projects and community-led efforts like Kubernetes that has drastically changed the architecture that we're all developing on and that we're building on, to observability platforms, to infrastructure tooling. Open source has really exploded, and it's come a long way. And I think that Sumo is a great example, of where this started. I talked earlier about Sumo starting as cloud native. 10 years ago, over 10 years ago when Sumo started, the open source landscape was very different. And we started from a very different point of view. Like I said, we were born in the cloud, and we needed tooling to ensure that we could provision our infrastructure and maintain that. And this was 10 years ago. Terraform, the universal de facto standard, it didn't exist. We had an internal tool that we developed called Dish. And over the years, we've been migrating off of Dish onto Terraform, as now open source has grown up a lot over the years and can replace a lot of this internal proprietary stuff that we've built. We've been moving our distributed microservices that have, when we were born, were built on AWS EC2, clusters of EC2 instances running various microservices that power our platform. We ourselves are in our journey to Kubernetes, to re-architect and to modernize and to get all the benefits of this. Even aspects like data collection, both internally, how we collect our own telemetry that help us monitor our service for our customers, but also even how our customers collect data and send data to Sumo Logic, moving from our proprietary installed collector to various open source agents like FluentD, FluentBit, or from JMX Transit to Prometheus instrumentation. And another project that we've been heavily invested in is distributed tracing. As we added distributed tracing support, that all started with OpenTelemetry. We'll talk a little bit more about that later in this presentation. So, I've been with Sumo for many years. It's been a really awesome journey to see how Sumo has evolved, how open source is really accelerating what we're doing every day, making our lives a lot easier. It's also been fun to see all the challenges that arise with all these new complexities, with these architectures, with the scale that we support. And with that, I want to hand it over to Perk, and he's going to talk a little bit more about Sumo, about the scale and some of those challenges we've had.
Yeah, so what scale are we talking about actually? So as a Sumo, we have more than 2,100 customers, and that's a lot. And to serve them properly, to serve the scale properly, we've set multiple regions of our application, and we use up to a couple thousands of nodes per region. And for that, we have a mixed infrastructure of the EC2 instances and the Kubernetes nodes. And with help of this infrastructure, we actually ingest more than 220 terabytes of data per day. That is as of January last year. So that is a lot of data. And then, once this data has been onboarded, our customers can analyze them, and they actually do that. We observe more than 871 petabytes of data scanned per day. That is, 18.6 billion events scanned per second, and that is a lot. But while handling that scale, we learned a couple of things, and we want to share some insight with you. But let me start with some history, actually. Sumo started with pure EC2 infrastructure, and now we are migrating into Kubernetes. So when we had only the EC2 instances, we created and used our own proprietary tool for collecting data. And that was fine. The same tool we provided to our customers, and everyone was happy. But starting with Kubernetes transition, we saw the opportunity that we could leverage the open source collection tools with success. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, So with that, we obviously had faster time to market in comparison to developing our proprietary collection tool, because those tools have big community of users and are quite mature and have a good fit for the Kubernetes use cases. So we used them and created our own solution for Kubernetes collection. It consists, as you can see here, of FluentBit and Prometheus, OTC, and FluentD to gather, logs, metrics, traces, and events. Then the data go to the FluentD for metadata enrichment, and then are sent to Sumo. We also use Falco for better security, and all of that is wrapped up in a nice Helm chart package. So everything is okay, right? We also learned our lessons in the meantime while doing that. There's no free beer. If you want to use the open source tools, you have to get your hands dirty. You have to help fix bugs, add new features, and generally, be a good citizen, file on issues, and so on. But do you see a problem here? This is, only about the Kubernetes, and let's collect the data from Kubernetes, but we are using 4 different tools to collect the data from Kubernetes. And 4 different tools, every one of them have different configuration, different place on the internet to file an issue. So that is not really good customer experience, and it's a burden, for our support actually. And that was only, about the Kubernetes. That was 4 tools for the Kubernetes. But what about all the other non-Kubernetes use cases? So we should be honest with ourselves. We tried that in supporting properly all the open source collectors out there is hard and is time consuming because a lot is going on in the open source world. There are, always new releases, new security patches. There are forks, SIG meetings, what have you. So, your documentation has to be super clear at how to configure the collector of your choice to properly send the data. There are different connection protocols, and every single one of those collectors have to have like proper exporter of data so that people know how to send the data to Sumo. And if you don't provide this documentation, both customers and your support will be lost. It's just too much. And that's one thing, that's the technicality, but on top of that, there is another challenge. And this challenge for us, especially, is the metadata inconsistencies. So that different metrics, for example, different metrics names for same things, or just, general lack of the metadata. If you don't have the metadata, you cannot query. So that is not very helpful. In this report, in the state of the enterprise enterprise open source report mentioned by Frank earlier, there is one section about perceived barriers to using enterprise open source software, and those barriers haven't shifted much over the years. The same ones take the top 4 slots year by year, and in 2021, the level of support took first place. While security concerns dropped from first to third, so security is no longer the most important one, but the level of support is. So, what can we do with that? With that in mind, we went back to the drawing board and we tried to tackle this problem from a different perspective. But, we were in a good companion, as the open source community also recognized those problems described before. So as a result of that, we came up with the new solution. So let me hand over to Frank, who will go deeper on the topic.
Thanks, Perk. Yeah, I think that, one of the things that I alluded to earlier and Perk just talked about again is the state of open source, the growth, the community. OpenTelemetry is a project that has come about. Not new, it's been around for a little bit. It started as the union of open census and open tracing, but it's definitely an interesting new kid on the block when it comes to data collection. It is actively being developed by observability vendors across the board, by every major cloud provider. Everyone's actively contributing and to this project to get it. We have been involved in the OpenTelemetry community for a little over a year now, actively contributing to the project on many fronts and embracing it from a data collection perspective. It's actually OpenTelemetry, when we launched our tracing solution last year, we had full support for OpenTelemetry from the beginning to collect all distributed tracing data. We recognize that, over the years, this agent proliferation that has happened within our own product and within our own customers makes data collection quite difficult and quite cumbersome, for all the reasons that Perk alluded to earlier. It creates a lot of friction for users today, friction that we want to address. Using a different agent for logs, for metrics, for traces, when they're all configured differently, they all behave differently, they all collect different things, it just adds a ton of complexity. And we believe that OpenTelemetry is the future of agent-based collection. It gives customers an option to have data collection that's universal, that can work with every observability vendor who supports it or every cloud provider who supports it, that's built on open standards, that gives customers a way to collect all their telemetry, no matter where it is coming from, no matter where it's running. Collection that's extensible, that's flexible, that's reliable as well. And going back to the supportability model here, a lot of enterprises, they want vendor support for their agents. When there's a problem, when they have concerns, when there's issues, they want to work with you as the vendor. They don't want to necessarily work with some open source repo where they have no control or they have no say. And so that's one of the primary drivers for us actually introducing our own distribution of OpenTelemetry. It's fully compatible with upstream OpenTelemetry, but for enterprise customers who expect just that little bit more support, who want that tighter integration and that tighter community around it within you as a vendor, it can relieve all those concerns that they may have. So yeah, OpenTelemetry is a strategic project for Sumo Logic. It has been in active development by Perk and his team, and we're continuing to invest and contribute here with the goal of OpenTelemetry being the standard for data collection at Sumo Logic. Now, let's not forget that OpenTelemetry is here now, but other folks may be using many of those other open source agents. They may have embraced those years ago. They may have built all of their collection on Telegraph or FluentD or FluentBit or Logstash or any one of the many open source agents that are out there. And it's important to still support those customers. And we recognize that. That's why we still support these agents today. We have integrations or ways to get data out of these agents today. When customers are using these or you're using these, getting them out is easy. And look, a lot of customers like to use these for the same kind of benefits that OpenTelemetry promises. Collection built on open standards, collection that can be transferred from one vendor to another without having to completely gut my infrastructure or to make significant changes to how I'm working. We're going to continue to support these agents for customers to get data into our platform. And our OpenTelemetry distribution is kind of the flagship collector that we may offer that's still built on open source, is still built on open standards. But certainly we recognize the value of an open community and the need to support many different things for our customers.
But let us talk just a little bit about the open source organization standards that and why you should actually care. Because apart from the third-party open source infrastructure tools that you can use and the collectors that you use out there are also open source projects you create or your company create actually. And what we learned, and we learned that hard way, is that when the company is growing, the organization standards are needed so that it is very clear as what is supported and what is not, and to what extent. It's very important to send a clear message to your audience, to your community, your customers, as what is the support level of the projects you have or your company have in your open source organization. One can use different, for example, one could use different organization or labels or badges. Just make sure to be consistent, have a scheme for naming the repositories, have a good place for code of conduct, and this kind of things. So the repository standards that we at Sumo are going to use are, for example, that every repository should have a license. I mean that is a no-brainer actually in the open source world, and if you are a company, you just have to have a license. You also have to have crisp and clear documentation for your users, for your customers. You should have about section and contribution guide and code of conduct, and the one that is the most important for me is that you really should have code owners. You should make sure that all of the public repositories have them. Otherwise, you will have a graveyard pretty soon. That can happen. It's very easy to create a project and just throw the project out there, throw the code, just build it, and then just forget it about it like 2 or 3 months after. So let's make sure we don't do that. You should have the issue or PR templates and automated testing for anyone who wants to contribute things, so that they know whether they broke something or not. And you should have actually standardized builds, like with help of, I don't know, Docker or Vagrant or what have you. We at Sumo are working towards this those standards. We are not there yet, but we are trying. So keep your fingers crossed. And the 3 key takeaways I think from this presentation for all the people out there is that we feel like the open source software has matured a lot. And while if you use it, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You should just use the open source software that is out there for your infrastructure and for the tools you use. And also there are even open source materials on how companies can manage their open source organizations, which standards to use, and so on. So let's just use that and don't reinvent the wheel. And the third one is that we really feel like the open telemetry is the future of agent-based data collection. So that being said, thank you.
Thanks very much for having us today.
Yep.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Perk. That was great. I especially like the open telemetry bit. I love that you're contributing there. So we have, by the way, a little bit of a delay. So we need to take a little break and wait for questions to come in, because the video stops a little bit later than it actually stops in the stream. So in the meantime, sorry. Would you like to tell us a little bit about how you kind of convinced, or how you evangelized the idea of open source, investing more in open source, especially in management conversations? Because that's usually how managers like to say, oh yeah, that's a great idea in general. I like the idea of, but then when push comes to shove, when it comes down to the bottom line,
sure.
What's your best argument there?
Frank, can I start?
Please.
Because
I
have this one thought. I think that this us having this Kubernetes thing, this Kubernetes package, was like a backdoor or something, because we just wanted to try the open source tools. They were just out there, and otherwise we would have to build the thing inside our installed collector, as we call it, our proprietary tool. And we didn't have much resources to do that. So it was much easier to just, take the stuff from the internet, see how they fit together, and just use that for Kubernetes. And it turned out great, actually. So, with that, we could start those conversations that, hey, look, this actually works. We don't have to, do it on our own. We can leverage the work that was out there. And also, while doing that, we can help to, make those tools better.
Yeah, the other thing I'd add to that is 100% agree that I think Kubernetes was a good catalyst for all of that for us. And I think that just the maturity of Kubernetes, the de facto nature, when you look at how we built our collection, we didn't choose random off the cuff shells. Every one of those projects is core to the CNCF. Every one of those projects is core to Kubernetes. Every one of those projects are very much, synonymously used with Kubernetes. They're not uncommon, right? They're the de facto tools for their job. And I think that when you present that to management as the solution and you show we're using the right technology to get the job done, I think that helps make a difference, because you're not just blindly making a case about open source. You're building a case around there's a need here. Here is why these solutions build the need and why they're the right choice. That's something that helped us, I think.
Yeah, great. Yeah, like I said before, don't reinvent the wheel, right? If it's out there, doesn't really matter if it's open source or not. Thanks so much. So a question that Lucas has, and I guess, Lucas, you can ask your question yourself, right? You're in this with us.
Yeah, so by level of support, yeah, you mean differentiating between things that are community maintained and things that are actually maintained by the maintainers, or is it something else?
You want to take that, Perk? You want me to?
Maybe you, Frank, you can go over
that? Yeah. So I think that there's two aspects there. I think I would look at it as both. So one is being very clear on your level of support of that project. If you're going to put an open source project out there, it's important for you to be honest with users of that about what level of support you give that. It might be something that you hope to be more community maintained, that you're looking for help from the community, that has your attention when it can, but it may not be a core thing that you're able to support, right? And so that in itself is good. And the other thing is, we being an enterprise offering for customers, we have a support team who needs to be taught how to use these tools to help support our customers when they open support cases for customers who may not go to the GitHub issues, right? Who may not be as comfortable. Again, going back to that, what some enterprises like, some enterprises don't want to go to GitHub. They want to use your formal support process or whatever they use to. I think those two aspects are important with it.
I can give like 2 examples. So the supported for us, like in the supported organization, would be, for example, Open Telemetry Collector at this point. So we say like we fully support OTC. You can bet on us. You can file an issue, and we will respond to that, and we will fix that. And from the other hand, we have, for example, we have tools created by our users, or by by our employees who just do those things after hours because they think that something might be cool. But if we cannot say honestly that we will support that, it's much better to put that in some community organization so that it's clear for everyone that this is only a community effort.
Makes perfect sense. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Is there anything you want to highlight about your work with open source that you haven't got the chance to mention in your talk yet?
Perk, you got anything?
It's fun. It's fun, and it's very rewarding, I would say. The thing that you when you think about it, that you're contributing to tools that are used by everybody. You use those tools at your company, your customers use those, and every other person can use those, and you don't do things that are kept inside, and you never know whenever the project is going to be canceled or something. Those projects are not canceled; they just live by their own. This is a very cool thing for me, so it's super exciting.
For me as a product manager, I'll give an example in OpenTelemetry. OpenTelemetry is a project that's contributed by many vendors, by many cloud providers. And let's be honest, some of us compete with each other, but that's okay because we're working towards a solution for our customers because we all have the same customer problems and we're all putting our customers first. And so it's very awesome to get on the phone, to solve these problems, to recognize that we all have the same problem and to find a way to fix those problems that's better for the community, that's better for all end users regardless. Like it's a very, very fun and rewarding thing that I think comes with this open source community approach to things. I think if you work with people of all walks of life, sometimes they're your competitors, sometimes they're not even in your space, but you learn a lot along the way. So I find that very rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny you should say that because I mentioned before that Lucas is also active in the open source community. And the project that you're working on, that you're contributing to, that used to be multiple different projects that all kind of solve the same problem. And then you just met and like merged it together to one thing where you're like competing to solve the problem in the best possible way, but then, coming together.
Open census, open tracing came together and for the better, right? For the better of things. Yeah.
Absolutely. Lucas, you want to say like a couple of words, plug your thing real quick?
Yeah, so we're trying to create a new project, external secrets operator, and it came from a similar story of a lot of projects trying to do the same thing, and now we're trying to converge on a central project to do this, to sync secrets from an external provider to a Kubernetes cluster, and that's it. And it's super simple, but yeah, now we're trying to converge on a single solution, and it's external secrets operator.